mode.
Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our Sophos webinar today. So we're joined here by Nick Ross from Sophos, who will be starting the webinar shortly. So just before Nick starts, I'd just like to go through a few housekeeping details with you. So you will be muted throughout the webinar, but we'll be holding a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, if you just pop them in the questions box, which is just at the right-hand side of your screen, we'll answer those at the end for you. So the webinar will be recorded and we will send you all a link to the recording this afternoon. So once the webinar is finished, a critique form will pop up. So if you would like any more information or if you'd like a call back from Bytes, if you could fill that out, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm now going to pass you over to Nick.
Brilliant, thanks Amy. Morning everyone. So yes, my name is Nick Ross. I'm a sales engineer working here in the UK channel, directly aligned with our platinum partners here in the UK, of which Bytes is one. So yeah, really excited to be here talking to you guys this morning. Just before I crack on though, can I just double check, Amy, you can see my slides okay? You're happy you can see my screen? Oh, just wait for some confirmation. Yeah, all looks okay. Okay, excellent. Good. So without further ado, the purpose of this morning's presentation is to talk about synchronized security, some exciting new revolutionary stuff that Sophos is doing within the security space. I appreciate some of you on the call here today might already be Sophos customers, in which case it's nice to tell you about some of the new stuff that we're doing that might be of interest to you, but appreciate also some of you may not be Sophos customers at all, you might never have done business with Sophos before. So hopefully cater for both those scenarios and you know about some of the exciting new things we're doing within the security space. So without further ado, just cover off what we're going to cover this morning. So we're going to look at the general problem within the IT security sector at the moment in regards to advanced persistent threats and cyber criminals, and perhaps some of the approaches they're taking towards trying to exfiltrate data out of organizations and essentially gather information for financial gain of their own for their own pockets, essentially line in their own pockets. Slightly marketing strong message there, but it's time for a security revolution. I guess the point is, you know, things have been done the same way for quite a long time, and we're seeing actually there's a better way to do things now within the cybersecurity space. And so we'll focus on how that works, what Sophos is bringing to market, and how that looks like. We'll talk about synchronized security and what we've already done, what we've already implemented into our portfolio last year, and also what will be coming this year as well with regards to features that support that synchronized security approach. And then finally, if you are a Sophos customer already, particularly, you might be interested in knowing how do I get to this synchronized security approach? How do I actually benefit from synchronized security? If you're an existing Sophos firewall customer or a Sophos endpoint protection customer, then we'll focus on the necessary steps to achieve the outcome and the technology that we're going to be discussing this morning. Okay, so what is the problem? Well, apologies for this slide. It's not intended to be a sort of scaremongering, oh, the world's a terrible, scary place slide. However, I think it is quite a good slide for really just using as a page marker, really, if anything else, just to talk about some of the latest stuff that has happened recently in the security space. You know, we see on a weekly, if not several times a week now, stuff in the press around large brands in the public eye being hacked. Countries, massive organizations, that you would expect to have very sophisticated and expensive security solutions in place, still being infected by malware, or being the victim of SQL injection attacks on web servers that they have, with their web servers essentially being taken over and dishing out drive-by downloads to unsuspecting people who browse them. It used to be that back in the day people would only really receive malware after visiting, should we say, some of the more fun areas of the internet. These days, actually, you can become a victim of cybercrime from going to a website that looks completely innocuous. So that's an occurring basis. Denial of service attacks, Regularly we hear about websites, particularly around busy shopping periods. The Christmas period has just recently passed. Essentially, companies losing a massive amount of income and revenue because of the fact that their web server and their presence online for people who are doing online shopping has been unavailable as a result of a DDoS attack. We often hear the term the Internet of Things as well. This seems to be a growing phenomenon, and that you can pretty much buy anything these days that will connect to the internet. It has a Wi-Fi card built into it, right down to sort of white goods, fridge, freezers, washing machines, and toasters even, should you wish. So we have to be understanding of the fact that actually, the world is a changing place. Sophisticated attackers, or perhaps less so, attackers these days can actually go out and acquire kits that allow them to create crafted malware without having to be a cyber criminal or an IT mastermind. They essentially have to tick a few boxes and specify which operating systems they're interested in creating malware for, and then the kit will actually create the malware for them. So, we're seeing actually more people working in this space that perhaps weren't working in the cyber criminal area before, and therefore the number of attacks are becoming even more prevalent. Crypto locker and ransomware as a generic term. So crypto wall is another variant of that, for example. Those less of a phenomenon these days, something, but is quite a prevalent attack where, if you've not come across this before, essentially a piece of ransomware will having got a footprint on a machine in your organization, it might be through some sort of phishing attack or drive-by download. That malware will then essentially connect to a command and control center or infected botnet server and download some encryption keys and essentially try and encrypt every piece of data it can see through any shared areas available to that endpoint on your network with a very strong encryption algorithm, and essentially hold you to ransom, as the name would suggest, until you pay some money or some bitcoins to unlock that data and get the encryption key. So I guess the point of this slide is there's some nasty stuff out there at the moment, and there are some people who don't necessarily have to be IT experts creating it. So we need to be more sophisticated and more joined up in our approach to dealing with those nasties. This goes further just to illustrate the issue here as well. So what we're seeing is that the proliferation of mobile devices particularly has a big impact on the attack surface. We're seeing people expecting to get access to work in corporate data, emails, etc., wherever they are on the go, using a variety of different platforms. They might be using Mac OS, they might be using Windows, they might be using Android tablets and phones, for example, but expecting to get access to all the data on all those wherever they are. So no longer are they just inside the corporate perimeter accessing information on the LAN or on a VPN. Which with that brings an increased attack surface and more prevalent attacks. We're actually seeing sophisticated attacks that move from one platform to another. In fact, our Sophos Labs team see in the region of 300,000 unique files or unique pieces of malware every day. Obviously, there are some days where that's a bit less, and some days a bit more. But on average, 300,000 submissions each day, and almost 75% of those are only actually seen once on one particular company's network. So, it's not like we see one particular virus that tries to attack every machine on the internet now. It's the case that actually people are creating very crafted and unique malware for particular organizations that they're trying to infect for whatever reason. One of the issues we see is that the security industry is very much a 2D industry in terms of the technology that's being used. We're using very much point products to try and fix problems. So, for example, for years people have been using firewall technologies at the perimeter of their organization, but that firewall really has no interaction with other security technology typically that might be used elsewhere within the organization. Similarly, we might be using encryption technology, which on its own is pretty effective at data loss prevention and preventing data being exfiltrated out of the organization, but that in a sense is all it does. Similarly with the endpoint and the AV and HIPS technology, it works just on the endpoint machines, no real understanding of what's going on at the network layer. And yeah, that in itself is a very challenging place to be, because even for ourselves, Sophos is a complete security vendor. Up until recently, we've gone along with the same sort of view. Lots of point products that work pretty well in conjunction with one another if you understand what each of them do and you're aware of the capabilities of each of those products. But actually, they are still just point products. So it's time for a security revolution. Here we go. So as I was just saying, point products have been used for some time. A layered approach, or defense in depth is the term that we often use here at Sophos. Is approach that we've been using for some time, with bundling together suites of tools, essentially many point products that not necessarily work together, but at least make sure that we cover all aspects of the security space and try and kill off as many of those attack surfaces as possible. But what we are moving to now, and something that we've trademarked, as you can see from the slide, is our synchronized security, or the security heartbeat, I should say. So this is an approach that we've taken. We've actually had a project rumbling on now for the last sort of 18 months, almost 2 years now, where we're leveraging the fact that as a security vendor, we're in a very unique position here at Sophos. Because we're a complete security vendor, we don't just focus on firewalls, we don't just focus on endpoint technology, or we don't just focus on encryption technology. We have solutions in all of those spaces, and in fact, we're the only complete security vendor that has a presence in the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a leader for all three of those product areas. So we're in the top right-hand corner in the Gartner Magic Quadrants for Unified Threat Management Gateway, or UTM, for endpoint protection, and also for mobile and data encryption. So we're in a very unique position. We're very proud of the fact that we're leaders in those three spaces, and we're essentially harnessing or leveraging that benefit to our advantage by introducing this security heartbeat technology. So the idea of synchronized security is it provides a much more comprehensive protection to your endpoints and your users, regardless of what it is that they're actually bringing to the party. So regardless of whether they're using WinPhone, a Mac platform, Linux, Android, Windows, iOS, accessing corporate data from any number of those devices, it doesn't really matter. The idea is that we want to have a unified and comprehensive approach to protecting all of those platforms. So it is integration at a different level. I guess the alternative is that if you have lots of different point products, you are essentially introducing an additional level if you want to integrate or report centrally on all those products. So you are going to have to introduce some sort of SIM integration tool to at least get all those products talking to the same point in order to manage them centrally. So by removing that extra layer of complication, we can make the system a lot more effective and easy to manage. So apologies, the reason for the image at the bottom left-hand corner is a chap called Galileo, who who realised that the sun was actually at the centre of the solar system. Galileo was the code name or project name internally within Sophos given to this technology, but we're going forward and taking to market the name Synchronized Security and Security Heartbeat. So if you see any references to Galileo in here that I haven't, for whatever reason, changed, then that's the reason for those. But ultimately, synchronized security equals Galileo. So yeah, we recognise that security must be comprehensive. As a complete security vendor, that's kind of the lifeblood of what we do. It can be made simple, and again, if you've used Sophos products before, hopefully you recognise that to be the case. We do go toe-to-toe with some of the more enterprise class vendors in the marketplace. However, we are a tier 1 security vendor, and we do go toe-to-toe with them in terms of functionality. However, our benefit and our sort of let's say our lifeblood, our USP as such, is that our products are much easier to use and manage. And security is a lot more effective as a system. This is kind of building on what I was saying earlier on around leveraging our unique position within the Gartner Magic Quadrant as leaders and in those three key product areas, and using that to our benefit. So we can see on the right-hand side, we're actually leveraging Sophos Cloud as a technology. So it's our cloud-hosted solution, hosted in AWS or Amazon Web Services, if you're not familiar with them, to essentially create communication between next-gen end user and next-gen network security products from ourselves. And essentially the way we've done that is we've created a heartbeat that communicates between those two product sets. The idea is that if you're using both those technologies from Sophos, then you can receive better protection by introducing the two to one another and sharing live information with Sophos Cloud about how the two are getting on. Okay, so how does it work? Well, so there's three key pillars to the security heartbeat. The first one is accelerated threat discovery. Obviously, the point is we need to be discovering whatever level it is, whether it be the network or the endpoint level, using a variety of components built into those technologies. As soon as we discover a threat, actually making sure that we know where the threat is coming from. So the active source identification capabilities built into Security Heartbeat allow us to gain a lot more useful information from the endpoint. Typically a network appliance using something like advanced threat protection capability, so any of the sort of next generation firewall products that are on the market these days typically have ATP capabilities built into them. They're pretty good at detecting a machine trying to go to a suspicious website, a command and control center, for example, as mentioned earlier on, or an infected botnet. However, all that next-gen firewall would typically do if ATP is switched on is recognize that call out to a known dodgy location and kill that task, that process. We can garner a lot more information from that endpoint because we have that heartbeat in place communicating between the network and the endpoint. We can also find out not just the IP address of the machine that's infected, trying to make that malicious call out, but also who the user is that's currently logged on, what's the process or the application or service trying to make use of that malicious site, and also what's the host name. So no longer is it just the IP address and the admin has to go away and do lots of trawling through DHCP logs and so on to find out what the IP address is, which user was logged onto the machine at the time. We can be a lot more effective at remediating this issue. And a lot of the response can actually be automated. So compromised endpoints, they're isolated by the firewall automatically, and while the endpoint terminates and removes malicious software. So we've done a lot to automate this this removal and remediation process. When we first initiate the heartbeat, the synchronized security between the endpoint and the next generation firewall, essentially there's a registration that takes place. So next gen end user protection and firewall register with Sophos Cloud, so both of them introduce themselves. A certificate that includes security information on both is shared, so that is essentially a secure link between those two technologies. Endpoints initiate connection to the trusted firewall, either from within inside a VPN or on the local LAN sat behind the next-gen firewall, and a validation takes place. So the firewall and endpoint check security info sent to them by cloud to verify that that information is valid, the information contained within the certificate. We have support for multiple locations, so as I just suggested, endpoints can establish a connection to the firewall at any of the customer's locations, as the Sophos Cloud Registry can be shared among Heartbeat-enabled firewalls as well. So if you've got multiple branch office locations with a next-gen firewall on each location, then Heartbeat is still achievable. We can actually host next-gen firewall in the cloud as well, if that's something you're interested in, or it can be hosted. There's multiple deployment options. It could be deployed in a virtual machine instance, or even as a software instance on one of your existing boxes. So we can talk more about deployment options if that's something you're interested in. A few bytes of information are shared every 15 seconds then between the endpoint and the network, essentially a sort of stay alive heartbeat to say, yes, I'm here and here's some information about my current status. Events, any events on the endpoint, such as a discovery or security information of malware, a PUA or potentially unwanted application, if you've not come across that before, is shared between the endpoint and network. And essentially then, depending on those events, a red, yellow or green health status is sent to the network. I'm not sure why the VPN's in there again, we've mentioned that already, so that's fine. Excuse me. The heartbeat is then used to positively identify the machine, so associates essentially the IP address with that particular endpoint. Obviously, we don't have to worry about IP address changes through DHCP leases and so on, because that heartbeat takes place every 15 seconds or so, so it deals with any changes of IP addresses. If you're moving from wired to wireless, etc., that's not a concern. Any advanced attacks, so anything coming in and being detected at the firewall level, if the network firewall detects an advanced attack but can't determine the source, it will request current details from the endpoint. So it knows the IP address of that machine, and it will request the name of the currently logged on user, the service that's actually making that call out to an advanced attack through the firewall, and also the name of the host. We'll then do some source identification as well, so the endpoint actually sends details of that, of those details to the firewall. We can configure automated incident response, so there are no default policies, however we can customize these as we see fit. We will be releasing some best practice guides later on this year, a sort of recommended policy setup, but for now essentially the world is your oyster with regards to how you can configure this. So depending on the green, yellow or red heartbeat status, you can determine what actually happens, what action is taken. For example, green, typically would expect that endpoints have full access to internal apps and data as well as the internet. But with a yellow machine, it might be that that is an affected endpoint that is perhaps having some malware cleaned up on it. There's the removal tool currently been distributed to the machine, therefore the status has gone from red to yellow. And so whilst that heartbeat status is still yellow, we can restrict access from to internal and sensitive applications and data, but still have access to the internet, for example. And a machine that is in red heartbeat status currently because it's got some malware on it and perhaps it hasn't had a cleanup tool distributed to it yet, then affected endpoints are isolated from the network and have no access to internal systems or the external internet as well. As I say, we can be completely granular about the level of access we want to have inside the organization, perhaps certain web services or applications internally within the land that they do have access to regardless of the heartbeat, because they're robust systems with their own advanced threat protection capabilities on them. Equally, it might be that those systems are quite insecure, and so we can obviously restrict access to them as well. So we released some capabilities around synchronized security already last year. So for a start off, early part of the year last year, we released the Sophos System Protector. This area here essentially has become the brains of our endpoint client. If you're a Sophos endpoint customer already, then you'll be already making use of the Sophos System Protector. It was contained in an update, as I say, in early 2015. And essentially that is the coordinator, the brains that interacts between all these various different components within the endpoint. We haven't got time to cover every single one of these aspects of the endpoint, and I don't want to bore you with that, but it's useful to understand that there are many aspects to our endpoint agent. It's not just doing antivirus and HIPS runtime protection, for example. It coordinates information from device control, for example. Our malicious traffic detection is a unique selling point to Sophos, something we again introduced last year. MTD, as it's often referred to, essentially is sort of firewall type capabilities that check for endpoints making callouts to potentially malicious locations on the internet, without relying on the firewall doing that. So if you're just a Sophos endpoint customer, it might be that you have a fairly old traditional firewall in place at the gateway, and that doesn't have advanced threat protection capabilities built into it, for example. In which case, MTD will have your back with that to a certain degree, and it will look for machines making callouts to malicious websites. That's very useful as well if you're looking at devices being used outside of the organization, not just inside on the network. So again, some additional control there. We obviously added the security heartbeat, the capability to communicate between the endpoint and the network as well. And obviously, all these components are constantly being updated by Sophos Labs, our threat detection center, and those are coordinating information received from over 100 million endpoints around the world that we protect. So a lot of big data contained within Sophos Labs. We also obviously updated our firewall technology, often referred to as UTM technology, to be able to offer this security heartbeat. So Sophos Firewall Operating System, or SFOS as it's often referred to, again coordinates many different capabilities depending on what your requirements are within the organization. So, for example, it's not just a next generation firewall and that's it. There are some really nice bells and whistles and capabilities on there, such as application control, so WAF, often referred to as email security and web filtering. This will do the job of an email filter or an email proxy box or a web proxy box that you might have currently within your organization, for example. But it is at the heart of it a firewall with some advanced capabilities built in there. So next-gen threat detection is essentially synchronizing those two new technologies that we've introduced, the endpoint and the network working together. In this scenario, we have an endpoint is detected making a call out to a malicious website. The ATP detection capabilities at the network level will actually detect that attempt to call out. And because we've got the heartbeat you can see has been initiated in the middle there, we can not just alert Sophos Cloud as to the fact that this machine has tried to go somewhere a little bit dodgy and tried to perhaps download a cryptographic key to be used as part of CryptoWall or CryptoLocker. We can also share with the administrator the name of the user, the system, and the file that actually tried to make that call out. The firewall can be used to isolate subnet and WAN access for that machine, so that essentially if it is in the middle of being compromised, it's not going to compromise any other machines on the network. We can block and remove malware, so we can, from Sophos Labs, download cleanup tools and actually remove that malware from the machine. And we can also identify and clean up other affected systems as well, again using those cleanup tools. So in terms of some of the cool stuff that we're on the roadmap to add this year as well for synchronized security, obviously taking that same platform, what we will be able to do in that scenario is share that information with Sophos Cloud, but we'll also be able to furthermore lock down local network access as well. So not just giving it only access to its local subnet and blocking access to the internet, but also we'll be able to isolate it from within the local network as well. We'll be able to remove encryption keys. This is probably one of the coolest things coming this year, actually. So let's think of a scenario. We've got our infected machine. It's got some really sensitive corporate data on there. We're a bit concerned about that data leaking out of the organization. We can, using our synchronized security approach later on this year, we'll be able to strip encryption keys, assuming they're using the Sophos safeguard encryption product. We'll be able to strip those encryption keys from the machine so that any data that should leak out of the organization, perhaps somebody's maliciously trying to physically attack that machine, plugging in USB sticks or trying to do some screen scraping, etc., then if the encryption keys have been stripped from that machine, then essentially they won't be able to view or copy any data from that machine that will be of any use to anyone. We're able to terminate and remove malware from the machine more effectively, and also we'll be able to use some application tracking capabilities built into the endpoint so that we can proactively clean up other infected systems. It might be that that particular piece of code that made the call out to Command and Control Center and downloaded that cryptographic key exists on other machines elsewhere on the network. We don't have to wait for that to explode and for that to become an issue for our systems to coordinate and stop that. We can actually stop it before it becomes an issue. We've also got some really cool technology coming in later on this year to discover unmanaged endpoints. So effectively, if a machine presents itself to the Sophos Firewall OS and it's trying to access the internet, but there is no heartbeat, we can say, well, okay, can it be managed? Is that machine a Windows, Mac, or mobile? device that can install the Sophos Cloud Agent on it to make it Sophos endpoint protected, in which case, let's protect that device. It might be that it's a personal device, bring your own device. It might be that it's a new machine, and so this could be used as part of our process for enrolling that device into our next-gen end-user protection. So the user authenticates against Sophos Cloud. They're essentially redirected for the first time if they try and connect to the network to a portal, and they will be able to self-service their session and essentially download the agents required to protect that machine. We'll then distribute the security profile back to that machine from Sophos Cloud and allow effectively that machine to access the internet. So some really cool stuff there coming. I hope you agree. What we want to have a quick look at now is how do we actually achieve this? So perhaps you're an existing Sophos customer using one or more of our products. Just wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on the options available to you. So let's first of all look at Sophos Cloud Endpoints. Quite a straightforward one. Sophos Cloud has been around for 18 months, coming up to 2 years now. So we have a number of customers out there already using our Sophos Cloud Endpoint solution. If that's you and you're already making use of that product, then essentially all we need to do is deploy an XG series firewall into your environment and create a link between your Sophos Cloud platform and your XG series firewall. If you are an SG series customer, so that means you bought one of our UTM technologies perhaps within the last 2 or 3 years, then you can essentially upgrade that for free to the latest software firewall OS. Next solution is Sophos Endpoint, which is managed on-premise via our enterprise console. So the first thing you will need to do to essentially benefit from synchronized security is actually be using the Sophos Cloud platform. So our on-prem solution won't actually be able to offer synchronized security and that heartbeat that we've been discussing. We have gone a long way to create some tools to make it easier for you to migrate to Sophos Cloud if that's what you'd like to do. So essentially we've created a migration tool that you can install on our enterprise console server. It will help you automate that process and migrate machines out of the on-prem solution to be managed by Sophos Cloud. You also, as in the previous scenario, need to deploy an XG series firewall, or if you've already got one of our SG series platforms, then obviously upgrade that to the Sophos Firewall OS. So that's just the SG series that is updatable. Anything previous to SG that has the UTM, Sophos UTM badge on it, those appliances unfortunately won't be upgradable. So as the next column says, you will actually need to refresh your firewall with an XG series appliance. Essentially, XG and SG are the same hardware platform, so you're not going to be upgrading a box that is substandard if you upgrade SG to XG. Essentially, there are 2 different firmwares used on the same hardware platform. So by upgrading from SG to XG, you're just changing the firmware. You're not actually, putting it's not like when you upgrade your iPhone to the latest version. I've got an iPhone 4 still kicking about at home, and you find that iOS 7 or iOS 8 kills the performance on that box. It's the same hardware. Essentially, you're just using the latest firmware. And in fact, the performance increases, we found, typically because of some optimizations in XG. So the final scenario is if you're a Sophos Firewall customer. So we've talked about Endpoint, both cloud and on-prem. If you're already an XG series user, then you need to start using Sophos Cloud to manage your endpoints to effectively benefit from synchronized security. If you are using our SG series, then you do need to upgrade. We are earlier this year, in this quarter, it's expected to be releasing a migration tool. So if you're an existing SG customer, we'd recommend that you migrate to XG to, again, a bit like with Sophos on-prem endpoint migrating to Sophos Cloud endpoint, we'd recommend you do a migration to carry forward as much of the sort of settings built into your environment and make that transition as smooth and as slick as possible. And then finally, if you have got a UTM series appliance, then you will need to refresh that with an XG series appliance. So quite a few different options there. I appreciate that might be a little bit confusing. If anyone does have any questions about that, please do ask, and I'll do my best to answer those at the end. So just by way of a conclusion, really, We are doing some really exciting stuff in the cybersecurity space. I'm very much in the belief that Sophos is in a very unique position in this space. We are able to offer those three products which we're Gartner Magic Quadrant leaders for, as opposed to a lot of the competition who will just perhaps be very good but offer point products that are good in those spaces. We're simple and easy to use compared to a lot of the competition, which can be more complex. We offer comprehensive cover, but as with point products, it's incomplete. You have to go out of your way to actually buy lots of different point products and essentially do a lot of the work yourself to integrate those technologies. We don't just prevent, so a lot of tier 1 security vendors, ourselves included, will say they're 99% successful at blocking and preventing malware. That's great, but actually what's really important is what you do about the 0.5, 0.6% of malware that you don't prevent. Any vendor that would tell you that they prevent 100% of malware would be lying, quite frankly. Ourselves included, we would never suggest that. But what we do say is that we're very good at detecting, investigating, and remediating malware that's seen on endpoints that we weren't able to prevent coming into the system. The last chance saloon really is really encryption. So a really nice position to be in if you've encrypted sensitive data on your company's network is to say, well, occasionally breaches do happen. There's nothing we can do about that. It was an advanced persistent threat. It was something that hadn't been seen before. Use some really unique approaches to get into the network. But at least if data did leave the organization unexpectedly, if it was encrypted, then we can sleep soundly at night knowing that, hand on heart, that information can't be viewed because it's encrypted with a strong 256-bit AES encrypted key. We focus on end user, network, server, mobile, web, email, and encryption. So we have fantastic products in all of those spaces. What you'll find with a lot of the competition is they're typically either endpoint or network vendors that might dip their toe in the other pool. We're one of those. So they typically tend to be mainly focused on the endpoint level and not so much on network, or vice versa. A lot of the capabilities built into our solutions are automated. I'll give you a perfect example of a scenario here, which you may well have heard of before. Actually, Target stores in the US a couple of years back now, so it's a bit of an old scenario, but still very relevant. They were infected with a piece of malware that got itself onto the point of sale machines within the Target stores all over the US. So hundreds of thousands of machines that were infected. The actual malware came into that organization from elsewhere in the supply chain. So it was an air conditioning company that supplied to the store that actually caused the malware to get into the food chain, if you will. They had a very capable firewall technology called FireEye that you might have come across before. FireEye was doing its job very well. It was alerting administrators to the fact that some sensitive data was leaving the organization unexpectedly. In this case, it was thousands and thousands of credit card details. However, the administrators became very numb to those alerts because of the way it had been set up. The system was constantly alerting them, but creating lots of work that people weren't following up on. So the fact that we've automated a lot of the protection means that even we're providing even better levels of protection than some very, very expensive enterprise class products on the marketplace that even though they might be doing their job well, ultimately the people managing those systems might not be. So we can automate and take a lot of that workload off end users. And then finally, we can block known, unknown, advanced, and coordinated attacks, again, because of that footprint that we have in both spaces, because we're working at both the endpoint and the network there. So there's sort of three pillars of the synchronized security approach. Just to recap on those, we do offer accelerated threat discovery because we are looking at not just the behavior of the endpoint, but we're also looking at the network level. We can provide positive source identification because we've got that heartbeat in place, and we can provide technologies to provide automated incident response on how to manage that endpoint through through from the point of infection right through to point of remediation. Okay, Amy, that's me pretty much done now. I don't know if you want to take back control. I'll pass back to you.
Lovely.
If anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to ask.
Lovely, thanks, Nick. So I'll just show my screen. So yeah, so if you do have any questions, if you just pop them in the questions box, and Nick will answer those for you shortly.
Okay, yeah, so there's one here, Amy, for asking for clarification regarding the migration path. So just to summarize, I think it might have come in perhaps before the slide I actually had on that. You do need to be using our Sophos Cloud endpoint protection product in order to be able to start using synchronized security. So if you're an on-prem customer using our traditional enterprise console, you won't be able to benefit from synchronized security. However, we've developed a free migration tool. The licensing cost is the same, so all you need to do is get in touch with your account manager at Bytes to talk to them about the fact that you want to swap out your existing on-prem Sophos licensing and move to cloud. There shouldn't be a cost in you doing that, even if you're doing it mid-term. I'm sure there's something we can do commercially to make that an okay migration for you. The only real cost to you as an organization is the time taken to do the migration, and as I said earlier on, we've created a free migration tool to make that as painless a process as possible. So even for very large organizations wanting to move to cloud endpoint, I'm not suggesting that it will be seamless and just happen overnight, but we've certainly created some tools and some FAQs, etc., to help with that process. I'm sure if you wanted to have a conversation with your account manager at Bytes around pro services to help with that process, then I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have a chat to you. Regarding firewalls, just to recap as well, so you will need to be using our XG firmware. That's the next generation Sophos next generation firewall. So if you're currently an SG appliance user, you're either using a physical SG Boxmers, or you've got it running in a virtual platform, or it might be even running it in Amazon Web Services. You will need to migrate that to our next generation firewall, our XG firmware. That is a completely new UI, new user experience. There are migration tools coming out, as I said, I think earlier in the webinar, coming out in this quarter to help you with that process. Obviously, synchronized security is something that we're getting a lot of interest in at the minute. A lot of customers are wanting to achieve this. It might be that it doesn't just happen overnight for you. And so, for example, if you are an SG firewall appliance user and you're thinking about migrating that, but you're waiting for the migration tool, it might be that there are other areas that we can get in. It's almost sort of getting your ducks in line and migrating from on-prem to Sophos Cloud first for your endpoints, whilst we wait for the migration tools to come out for your firewall product. So rather than doing all at one big bang, so to speak, we can do it in a much more staggered approach. So it's a sort of journey to realize synchronized security.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, so we have.
That's right, Amy.
So this is from Tim, who said, if we use AWS, can we restrict to only AWS Europe?
I believe you can. So is the question regards to who can access the Sophos firewall? I think perhaps I'd need to get some more information from Tim about that. But yeah, I think probably what Tim's asking is, can we specify where the data is hosted? In which case, yes, you can. When you sign up, you can specify AWS data servers here in Europe, which are, I think, at the minute hosted just outside Dublin, and also AWS have just opened up a new one in Germany somewhere.
Sorry to interrupt, Nick. Yeah, so Tim's just said it's for more data storage.
Yeah, so I believe you can, but what I would suggest is if AWS is of interest to you, hosting the firewall or Sophos Cloud, it's something you want to find out a bit more information about, by all means, have a conversation with your Bytes account manager offline, and we can set up a sort of more detailed conversation around that. But I think yes is the short answer.
Lovely, thanks, Nick.
No worries.
So just wait for some more questions.
Whilst we're just waiting for any more questions, Amy, it's worthwhile mentioning with the AWS Amazon Web Services hosting that we are in a situation whereby you obviously get complete resiliency with that system. So if you're concerned about where your data is being hosted, essentially with Sophos Cloud, when you create a Sophos Cloud account, it says, do you want to store your data in the US or in the EU? Obviously, most customers on this call, I imagine, would select EU because that's where they are. And their Sophos Cloud data, of which there isn't that much, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because it's not significant. Most of it's actually on the endpoint, but the management information and database essentially would be stored on servers in the AWS data centers here in the EU, obviously, as you'd expect from selecting that option. But you do have multiple failover zones within the EU, so you don't have to worry about if a server farm within AWS was to go offline, about servers coming back online in the States with your data. There are multiple data warehouses within AWS stored inside the EU, so you basically have a failover zone that brings up other servers, probably just in another town down the road from wherever it is that Amazon hosts their data warehouse. Do you have any other questions there at all, Amy?
No, none at the moment. So should we just leave it at that? Obviously, if you do have any questions you want to take offline, you just pop those in the feedback form at the end. So thanks again, Nick, for presenting today, and thanks everyone for taking the time to watch the webinar today. So as mentioned previously, we will send you all the link to the recording this afternoon. And if you could fill out the critique form at the end, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, so thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, Amy. Cheers. Bye-bye.